So I'm here with Jenny Strauss-Clay in her sumptuous flat in Berlin. It's a real pleasure to talk to you, Jenny.
Yes.
You gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago,
Yes.
in German.
In German, I was very proud of myself.
It was on Homer.
Homer,
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, the title was, very provocatively, Homer schreibt, Homer writes, exclamation point. And it was a little thing that occurred to me on January 2nd.
Of this year?
Yeah. And so I thought it was odd, but it should be tried out because it may have been quite mad.
Okay.
And it is a passage I happened to, because I was working on something else, in book 7 of the Iliad, where Hector imagines. This is right before the duel.
Yeah.
With Ajax.
You're right. Yeah.
And he sort of sets out the conditions of the duel.
Yeah.
And he says, if I lose, the Greeks should give my body back. But if I win, we Trojans will give the body back, the Greek, and I will take the armor and dedicate it to the Temple of Apollo. And that's interesting in itself as to how that would happen. And then he says, so that, and the Greeks will make a burial mound, a sema, on the Hellespont, right, so that somebody of the late-born men, opsigonoi anthropoi, will see the sema and will say, here is the sema of a man whom Hector killed, and my fame will live forever.
So there's an epitaph.
It's an epitaph.
Right.
Now, that's not what epitaphs say. Epitaphs say, here lies Mr. So-and-so. And so this is very odd. Once you start thinking about it, how do you convey this message? And what I argue is that the only way that this message could be conveyed is through writing. And of course, when I mean the whole issue of Homer writing goes back to Wolf, even before Wolf, and they're always the same passages that are brought into the discussion.
Bellerophon.
The Bellerophon and the lots.
Yeah.
And neither of those, I think, require writing.
But this one obviously does. You need to see it.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because the sema is not, here is the sema of X, but here is the sema of nameless, whom Hector killed. Now, even if we think of a representation, a stele, with representations, we would still need, let's say you have a stele with two warriors. You'd still need one of them.
Identification, right.
Saying Hector.
As you have on pots.
Yeah. And so, now this passage has been discussed in this context, but it hasn't been seen as central. And I'm not sure, and then somebody said, well, you'd have to get very close to be able to read it. Well, that's quite true. But he does specify, Hector specifies, A, it will be long into the future when the memory is gone, and 2, it be a stranger that is not a local who would know the local lore.
Yeah.
So he's cut this person off from local lore. He's not a local. All he knows is what he can read.
Yeah, and the future time too.
Yeah, and his future, so he's not one of the locals who knows who's buried there. So I argue that this is it's indirect maybe, but it is the most compelling case for writing. In Homer, as I say, other people have mentioned this passage, but they always seem to back away and say, but we know that Homer didn't know writing. Or this doesn't really work. It's a fantasy. But I don't see how it could work without writing.
And does that make a difference for you, for how we think about Homer and the Iliad as an epic oral poem?
Because it's not only using writing, but it's perverting. It's manipulating writing. It's the first damnatio memoria we have. Because the person whose tomb it is, we don't know who it is.
Right.
But we know who killed him. So he's elided the victim.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems to me that's an extremely sophisticated use of writing.
Yeah.
So writing is manipulation and suppression, which seems to me would argue for a knowledge of the possibilities of writing.
Particularly for carrying a memory.
Yeah. And so I have always been very careful, never ever, as I say to my students, we do not date Homer. That means we do not take him out on dates. I don't know the date of Homer, but I think this is a very important passage for those who want to date him. And so I sort of threw this out, and I'm hoping that somebody will show that this is not
totally mad.
Yes.
The other thing you've been working on, if you like, something completely different, well, not completely because it's still Homer, is working on using digital resources somehow to explore spatial patterns in Homer. I was wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Well, let me tell you how I got into it, because
sounds a good idea.
Because it's something completely different for me from anything I've done before. And that was a long time ago, this conference that I and some other people had organized about deixis in Homer.
Mm-hmm.
And
deixis in this sense meaning?
Pointing.
Right.
And interpreting that in the Homeric context. And at that time, I did not do anything because I was working on something else, and but I felt very guilty.
Guilt is a good motivator.
Yes, and then years later, after, because I was working on the Hesiod book, and so I couldn't. I'm a very
one thing at a time.
Yeah. I know there are people I admire very much who can do several things at once, and I'm not one of them because I become obsessed.
Yeah.
But I did have an idea, and the idea grew out of this one passage in Book 12, where there's a long description of 5 contingents, 5 Trojan contingents, and who is in charge of each. And it's very elaborate. It goes on for a great many lines. And I thought, this must be important. And that was really the beginning, because it prepares for the whole battle books.
Right.
Starting 12 through 17. Yeah? And of course those are everybody's favorites because everybody says it's really boring because, well, we have, of course, the seduction of Zeus, which sort of helps us get over this. But it's, there's a lot of killing one after another.
It's a bit Tarantino.
And, but I said, why this elaborate thing? And then I started looking at it, and then I started doing little color-coded columns.
And it's just by hand?
Oh, yeah. Well, they're actually in my computer. And color-coded the various contingents. And the thing that ended up being deceptive was that they're not 5, they're really 3. And they're 3 gates. And then I had a vision. It was really like a vision. An epiphany. All of a sudden, I saw the whole battlefield. And the 3 gates, and where everybody was. And it seemed to me that not only the strategy makes sense, that is, what happened over here had an influence on what happened over here, and that it wasn't just one killing after another. It was a bunch of killings here which allowed these people here to do certain things, and then in the middle, then there's space so that Hector can break through the wall, and so on and so forth.
It's a kind of a muse-like view of what's happening on a battlefield.
Well, that was what was interesting. It was, you think of the muse as being, and the gods, as being over and on top of this sort of bird's eye view.
Yeah.
And what I found is that it's not a bird's eye view. It is a ground level view from a fixed point. And that fixed point can be mapped, and it's the middle point, which is the ship of Odysseus.
Yes, of course, yes.
And so you have left and right and middle, and then of course the interesting thing is to ask, well, if this is true, why would the poet do that? And I think there are 2 reasons, and they're actually both the same reason, which is he sees the battle, and he has to organize it in his own mind, in his sort of mental framework. But he also wants to convey it to his audience, because otherwise they're just going to see a bunch of killings.
Particularly if they're not reading it and they're listening to it.
Yeah, and then one would be interested in thinking in terms of performance.
Yeah.
What about gesture?
Right.
Would that be something that would help the audience? Now, I assume that the audience of epic is pretty well trained in hearing battle scenes, because that's
epic.
Hey. So they can understand, but I could see a gesture on the part of the poet, which will take us to this side and then return. And then he's got various techniques to move from one side of the battlefield to another. And I discovered that the similes are and you can see, I mean, the technique really does seem cinematic. You're over on this side, let's say, and then you have a simile which looks over the whole battlefield. So they fought like fire, like blah blah blah, and then you come down in another area.
Right.
And you really have the sense of moving
panning
away
out
and then panning in.
Yeah.
And it's quite remarkable, I think, but very, very, very visual. there were times when I was doing this when I thought it was quite crazy. And so did some of the co-workers. And we had these hilarious moments when I would be working with someone, we were both on the computer, and we were moving people around. And I'd say, no, Hector has to be over here. Please put him over here. Through the magic of computers, you can do this. But I think that the battle books in the Iliad now make sense strategically, which I didn't think they, I don't think anybody really thought they did. And that we have a real progression of, not just literary, but it's really strategic, so that things happen in different sectors of the battlefield, which affect other sectors, and so that when, for instance, the Trojans finally take the wall, you can understand why they managed to take the wall, because there was a breach there.
Right.
So this is, I thought, very exciting. And then I got involved in reading some of this quite different work on cognitive mapping.
Right.
And that was fascinating. And yet it's so obvious. Most of us never think about the fact.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, when you go to the grocery store, and you are telling someone how to get there, who's not a local, you say, well, you go down the hill, and you take the second right, and then you will see this sign, and there you need to take a left. What you're doing mentally is taking that itinerary as you explain it, and you say you, which is very interesting. You're not looking at it as a map, you're seeing it as a path, and you follow that path. It's a fundamental way of seeing.
Yes.
And once you started seeing that way, you see it all the time in literature. And so, one of the latest projects, which is very, very much still in progress, is we're looking at the catalogue of ships.
Right, the catalogue of ships. The other exciting bit of the Iliad.
Yes, we love the boring part. When I teach the Iliad, my students start cringing and say, oh, we're going to work on the catalogue of ships.
Of course, the catalogue of ships is great, and we're going to find out why now.
So, I had this idea, and after working on the battlefield and this whole idea of mnemonics and loci and itineraries, that it might be worth looking at the catalogue of ships in those terms. And so we started a project mapping the catalogue of ships.
So actually seeing the places that Homer mentions, seeing them on a map.
Seeing them on a map.
And sequentially, as they come up in the narrative, you see them appear on the map, so you can follow along.
But on a map, of course, we're still
like
looking
that.
above.
Yes.
So then the question is, what about the possibility of an itinerary between these places?
Yeah.
And in some, we've made already, and here I have to talk about not me, but my wonderful collaborators, who are two graduate students, Ben Jasno and Courtney Evans, who have been working on this and have actually been doing all the technological stuff.
I know the feeling.
And so they have been taking different parts of the catalogue and looking to see something, and what's been very exciting is that some parts do seem to work as itineraries, and seem to follow a kind of a path between various points.
So as you're moving around, like for example the Peloponnese or something,
yeah,
you go from one point and you go around.
And they really are determined by the geography,
right?
Which of course with Greece was very complicated, full of mountains and complicated ways of getting around.
Yeah.
We haven't also, another part of it is also to when you're going from one place to another, when do you jump on a boat? Because it's the most intelligent thing to do. But some things do seem to function as itineraries. There are others that seem to function differently. And one of the things I also looked at was a different way of organizing space, which which emerges from looking at the not the catalog of ships, but the Trojan catalog. And there you have a different way of looking at space. You have a central point and then spokes going out from that central moment.
And the central point is
Troy. Yeah. So you go, each of the spokes go in stages to the furthest point, and then you start again at Troy and go in different directions.
That's interesting in terms of it, even just in terms of thinking about the difference between the Greeks, this kind of loose coalition from everywhere and almost equal in a way, and then Troy is a centre.
And the allies.
Yes, that's right.
So one of the things that we found, and this has been very exciting, I think, and part of the thing that's really exciting about all this is that we found things we didn't know.
Because you were able to see.
Because we were mapping them.
Yeah.
And so in the case of Boeotia, the great, long, the lengthiest chunk of the catalog, and everybody's always wondered, why is this so detailed and so complex, whereas other areas are less so.
And it's, of course, we should remind people that Boeotia is the home of Hesiod, with the other great catalogue poet.
Yeah, and then, there's the idea that, there's this tradition of catalogue poetry, which comes out of Boeotia. But we don't know. But what was interesting when we started mapping this is that it looked as if the organization of the space of Boeotia and the Boeotian contingents came from a central point, and that point seems to be Thebes. Now that's really cool, because Thebes is no longer in existence. It's mentioned in various places in Homer, but in the catalog it's actually not. There's something called Hippo-Thebes, under Thebes, but I think the notion is that as far as the catalog is concerned, Thebes is somehow destroyed, but the traditions about Thebes, there are many references, Tydeus and so on and so forth.
Yes.
But it looks as if that whole section of the catalog may be constructed with this central point and then spokes.
Which is more like the Trojan model, not like the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
yeah.
That's interesting.
And I don't think we would have had any clue about this until we had tried it.
And Thebes is a great absent presence, because
Yeah,
that's the other. Of course, Thebes is the other tradition about a siege and a sack, and Homer silences that with the Iliad.
And of course, what happens in the Iliad is in in the battle books, the beginning of the battle books, built earlier, but the wall becomes, so the Greeks become the besieged city.
As they would be in the Theban epics.
Yeah, yes. And so one of the things that we've been wondering about, I haven't worked it out yet, but it would be really exciting if we indeed have 7 spokes coming out of Thebes, which would, the traditional 7 gates and so on. But so the exciting thing is we don't know what we're going to find. That I think is one of the really exciting things about this whole digital humanities. In some cases, and in many cases I confess, I have the feeling that what you put in is what you get out. But there are certain kinds of things where you seem to be able to use this as a tool for finding out things you didn't know or had never thought of. And that's the exciting thing.
Yeah. So it's not about illustration.
No, it's not illustration. It's playing around. And the other important thing, of course, is to make the stuff available to other people, so they can play around, because they can find things that I never even thought of.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. And so, but I have to say again that I have no knowledge of anything technical. I'm completely dependent on these brilliant people who know how to do things and talk about code and stuff like that. But I think that once we look at the possibilities, we can start thinking, and especially about space.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are other kinds of possibilities to temporal manipulations and so on. But space seems to be sort of an ideal kind of problem to use with this technology, and to see how space is organized, and to work from text to space and back. I think it's tremendously exciting. And we've been having a lot of fun.
Jenny, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. We'll have the links to your various projects, many projects, up on the web too, to accompany this tour. And it's been really lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.